Mr. Chairman, and I really want to thank my friend and our ranking member, Mrs. McMorris Rodgers, for bringing this important amendment. Look, there weren't a lot of our current members who served with Henry Hyde. He left Congress maybe about a year before I came in. But if you look at the history of the Hyde Amendment, it really is what the way Congress used to work, where Democrats and Republicans would come together. It was in 1976 that Henry Hyde passed the first Hyde Amendment to prohibit taxpayer funds from being used to fund abortions. And if you remember back to 1976, Henry Hyde was a Republican in a Democrat majority Congress, and yet he was able to work with Democrats. In fact, the vote on the first real Hyde Amendment was 312 to 93. 312 to 93 Republicans and Democrats in a Democrat majority Congress coming together to say, all the disagreements that there are on abortion in the heels of Roe v. Wade, but there was a almost complete coalescence that said, regardless of where you are on the issue of abortion, taxpayer funds shouldn't be used to fund abortion. And by the way, back then it was estimated that about 300,000 babies a year were being murdered using taxpayer funds. Not all abortions in America, just taxpayer funds. So imagine from 1980, when it completely took effect, till today, over 40 years of Hyde Amendment history. If the average back then was 300,000 babies a day that were not being aborted, that every year haven't, just imagine all the lives that are on this planet today because of Henry Hyde's work, with Democrats and Republicans joining together. This used to not be a partisan issue. I hope it doesn't become a partisan issue. But as some of my other colleagues pointed out, this transcends the abortion debate. When you look at polling, people who identify as pro-choice, a majority of them recognize that taxpayer funds shouldn't be used for abortion. Think of what that means to people who, like me, are Catholic and who have strong religious beliefs that abortion is wrong, and yet their taxpayer funds are going to be taken and spent on abortion. This is something we all used to agree upon, and I hope it stays bipartisan. But again, we're talking about a bill dealing with COVID relief, as others have said, where there are many priorities a lot of us would have liked to include in this bill that aren't in this bill. It's not like there's unlimited money. $1.9 trillion is way too much to be putting out there when there's over $1 trillion of unspent money. I'd much rather see us start with the 1.2 or so trillion dollars that haven't even been spent yet in previous bipartisan COVID relief packages. But in the meantime, if we are going to be talking about what to do with limited resources, I wish more money was being spent to ramp up more vaccines or to help get schools reopened even faster and putting teachers at a higher priority level and so many other people that aren't getting the help that they need. But to say you're going to divert some of those resources away and just throw Hyde, the history of Hyde going back to 1976, out the window would be the first spending bill that we've passed that didn't include Hyde protections in decades. That's not the history that we want to start. Joe Biden himself had been a strong supporter of Hyde, probably his entire career in the Congress. That's not the message that we want to send, that in the name of COVID relief, in a very hyper-partisan way, Democrats in Congress destroy over 40 years of bipartisan history in gutting the Hyde Amendment. That's not who we are. I hope it's not who we become.